Say to me when you start.
Oh, it's up to you.
Okay, just say to me.
Okay, it's okay. Let me start. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Yuri. I'm very glad that you guys are all here. I'm a student in engineering in Brasília, and today I will talk about my research paper, which is about the challenges for engineers to change the construction scenario in Brazil. This topic is very important to me because I conducted a research paper in Brazil about industrialized materials, and I also worked in a very big company in the project and planning department. This is a picture of our construction site. We built an entire city with more than 2,000 residential houses in 4 years of construction. So with this background, I could realize that we must change the construction method in Brazil. So let's move on to the structure of my presentation. I will begin with the purpose of my presentation, then we're going to move on to the discussion sections, in which I will talk about the conventional construction method, then the industrialized construction method, then I'm going to make a contrast between those, and finally we will talk about some problems related to the construction industry. And finally, we're going to move to the conclusion. Let's begin with the purpose of my research, in which I analyzed the construction scenario in Brazil by making a contrast between the construction methods, focusing on the basics socio-economic problems in Brazil. And finally, how can we change the construction method? Well, let's move to the first discussion section, which is the conventional construction method. The conventional construction method has some activities based on labor intense, which has excessive concrete casting. It requires skilled labor. It has less machine usage, and it's built on site. That means workers, they will make all the construction process on the construction site. Here is a picture with the main example of the construction method, which is widely used in Brazil. This method has some characteristics, such as low productivity, because the workers, they are only specialized in doing several tasks, so it takes more time to manage and make operations with fresh concrete. It has less planning during project design, which means that the builders, they do not give the appropriate relevance to the project design, and due to that, they can change the project design during the construction enforcement. It also has initial low cost, which is a topic that I will explain better later. It's related to the fact that conventional materials are cheaper than the industrialized one, and it has negative environmental impact. Operations with fresh concrete usually has a lot of waste during the construction enforcement, and all those characteristics, they contribute to the informality in construction. That is the one example is that picture, and here are some main examples of the conventional construction method and some problems related to it. So we have poor quality of the building, we have low productivity, and it generates a lot of waste during the construction. Now let's move on to the second discussion section, in which it is the industrialized construction method. This method has some, it is based on assembling and installing of prefabricated elements. So it requires a standardized facility, it requires specialized skilled labor, and you must consider logistic and project planning. So this method, this starts in an industrialized facility, then the elements, they are made and they have to be transported to the construction site, and there it happens the building erection. This is a picture showing precast concrete industry here in Colorado. This method has some characteristics also, such as initial high cost, because the elements they are made in an industrialized facility, they have a very specific controlling quality process which increases the materials quality, and so the materials they are more expensive. This is why we have high initial cost for this method. It has high productivity because the workers they are specialized in doing one or maybe two tasks. So the productivity of the teams increases, and so it's a faster way to build. We also have more planning during the project design. So it takes more machines to transport, handle, and carry the prefabricated elements, because usually they have a bigger size and they're usually very heavy. And it also has less adaptability to design changes. This happens due to the fact the elements they have a specific position in which they must be installed. So the owners and the builders they cannot modify the project if they find necessary. And for last, we have less environmental impact. Because the components and the elements they are not fabricated in the construction site, that means we avoid unnecessary wastes. Here we have some main examples of industrialized construction methods and some characteristics such as assembling and installing, more usage of machines, and more cleaning on the construction site. Well, with that, we saw two different types of construction methods. Then we can make a contrast between those, in which I made a table highlighting some advantages and characteristics of each method. For instance, the yellow cells they represent an advantage over the construction method. So, for example, the industrialized construction method has a higher productivity in contrast to the conventional one, so the yellow cells represent an advantage. With this table, we can see that the industrialized construction method has a higher cost benefit in comparing to the conventional one. This is a characteristic which I think is very important, and I would like to explain more here. The cost benefit is the main advantage of an undertaking process in which you invested. That means when you choose to change the methods that you are used to doing, you gain some advantage over it, such as you can reduce the total cost. We saw that the industrialized construction method has a higher productivity, so it takes less time to erect the building. That means we spend less time with labor, so we can reduce the cost with labor, which represents a very important share in the total investment. And we also can reduce the total cost by saving materials, as the industrialized construction method has fewer materials. You have less materials waste in the construction. You save money with that. You also can increase quality, because the elements they are fabricated in the industrialized facility, so the building in general has a more high quality than the conventional one. You also can improve safety, because the industrialized construction method has more planning and organized activities, which can reduce the risks and unnecessary activities that may happen during the process of the construction. And finally, you can reduce schedule, because the industrialized method has it's faster to build. But with that, we can realize that the construction method that has more high cost benefit is the industrialized one. So why does Brazil still build with conventional methods? Well, first of all, we have some factors that can answer this question. First of all, we have a high percentage of unlicensed builders. According to the House National Survey in Brazil, the percentage of unlicensed builders has increased to 57% to 75% during 1981 and 1999. That means builders without information or without technology or even without professional guidelines are building. We also have initial low cost. Due to the fact that Brazil has a low family income, builders, they choose cheaper materials to build. In case, they build with conventional materials. And we have no government regulation. This is a very important factor. That means the government cannot control how and who builds, and this can increase the risks, and it's hard to the government to check for quality of the building. And for last, which I think is the most relevant factor, is the afraid of new technology. I made a research interview a couple of weeks ago with Dr. Kim. He's a PhD professor from the Department of Engineering in the UCD, and he told me that there's a gap between the developing of new types of technology and the implementation of it in the construction industry. This happens due to the fact that engineers, they are afraid to change the construction method they are already used to build with. Also because the construction industry involves a lot of responsibilities, and so human losses are not acceptable. And for last, usually new types of technology, they are expensive, and in contrast to the old ones. So the business owners, they usually doesn't want to afford for a new type of technology that it just came out. Here is a main example of those factors, but we cannot blame just the problems related to the construction and justify it. Why does Brazilians still build with conventional methods? We have some problems related to the socio-economic issues that directly impact the construction industry, such as we have a huge housing deficit. According to the Institute of Applied Economic Research in Brazil, we have a housing deficit of more than 5.2 million houses. That means people will continue to build even without professional guidelines or regulation of the government. We have the low family income and the poor education of health systems, which directly impact the choice of types of materials and the labor quality. And for last, we have the corruption in the government, which directly impacts the infrastructure and the investments, which they are essential to the good performance of the construction industry. Now I would like to conclude my presentation saying that today I present to you two types of construction, in which we saw it the industrialized construction method has a higher cost benefit, but problems related to the construction industry, such as lack of professional guidelines and lack of technology, and problems related to the socio-economic issues, such as poor education and corruption, they all negatively impact the construction industry. So I would like to say that the engineers, they have a very huge challenge, and that goes beyond the problems in the construction industry, but they are the main responsibles to change the situation. In my opinion, I believe they must spread information through all the areas related to the construction industry. Through schooling and through networking, we must spread information that a bigger decision can be made to be a bigger nation, a stronger nation. So, thank you. Are there any questions? Well, these are my reference. If someone wants it later, I can make a copy if someone finds it interesting. And that's all.
Great, thank you very much.